Tonight, we have the latest on the largely peaceful Occupy protesters. It's amazing to me the positive spin these guys get with all the rapes and the sexual assaults and the thefts and the public defecations in churches and everywhere else, and the murders. But once again, the mainstream media is barely covering the shocking story that we're about to bring you. And if they do report it, they tend to just kind of leave out a few minor details. Tonight is a story that was published in the local paper, and they also buried the lead. The headline from the San Francisco Gate is this: Oakland couple Susan Poff and Robert Kamen mourned. That's the headline. Remember that headline, because is this the story? When we're finished with the story, let's see where that would rank on the list of possible headlines that you might choose for the story. It is about Susan Poff and Robert Kamen. They were both great people. They were exactly the kinds of people that I think will save America. They were selfless, they were kind, they were generous, they were charitable, they were active, they were dedicated to fighting poverty, they were helping the less fortunate. They're the kind of people that probably disagreed with me on politics, and yet we agreed on so much. They're the kind of person that probably crossed all lines. Susan was described as friends as the sweetest woman at the clinic where she worked. Anytime the police encountered somebody living on the streets, they called Susan. She would help them get health care and other basic needs met. She also mentored hundreds of blossoming medical students and nurses. Her coworkers said, quote, "I've never met anybody who lived with as little ambivalence about making the world a better place." She was the most loving, heartfelt, solid, and wise person who ever cared for people living in poverty. Now, her husband shared the same passion to help others. He was a psychologist. He wanted to help his older brother who had a mental disability, and that's why he became a psychologist. And then he ended up working with some of the toughest cases in the San Francisco jail system. So it was no shock to anybody when the couple couldn't have a child of their own, and they decided, we're going to adopt a child, specifically an older child who had a tough start. They realized they couldn't have a child, and so they adopted. It made their decision easy. 10 years ago, they adopted a 5-year-old boy. Little did they know that 10 years later, that adopted son, when he would be 15, would strangle both of them to death and then hide their bodies in the trunk of the family's PT Cruiser and then try to set it on fire. The 5-year-old, now 15 and 200 pounds, named Moses Alfredo Kamen, was at home alone with his mom on Thursday evening. They had an argument. He strangled his mom to death. And then he waited for his dad to get home. And he waited. And when his father finally came home from work helping others, he snuck up behind him and strangled his father to death as well. He then, God only knows what he did after that, but he waited until 3 a.m. to take the bodies to the trunk of the car. The boy previously showed no signs of trouble. So what happened? What could have possibly changed in this boy's life to negate the 10 years he spent living under the roof of a loving couple dedicated to a selfless life of just helping others? Well, here's my favorite part. Here's how the media explains it. The media says, well, it's adoption. You never know. I like this one. It's video games' fault. The uncle says that he played violent games sometimes and it was getting out of control. Or it's parental discipline's fault. He had been suspended from school. They'll blame it on just about everything you can possibly come up with, except for this, the real reason why he was suspended from school. His parents had objected and had argued with him about the time he spent running away from home to live at Occupy Oakland protests. You remember these protests. They're so beautiful and kind and lovely. They're definitely not the case of anything. I mean, this wouldn't influence anybody, a 15-year-old kid. The truth is easy to see here. So why is the media not covering this story? Because this story, if you're somebody who's in the news business, this has the hallmark of every great legitimate national news story. This has, I mean, are the players not sympathetic enough? The parents who are working hard to help others? Are there children involved? Adopted children that might go wrong at any time? Politics involved? Yeah. Is it gruesome? Sure. Kids strangled both parents. All of these things make this story a quintessential front page, Dateline, 60 Minutes, 2020 story that they would chew on for weeks on end. Did they? No. No. And here's why. Because the Occupy movement is the politically correct movement. Listen carefully. It is who our media and our government have become. That should take your breath away. When this movement becomes mainstream, when it becomes who America is, we're in deep trouble. We've shown you the scoreboard on Occupy. There's been 6,500 arrests, there have been 10 deaths, 6 rapes, and $26 million in taxpayer money for damage. There's also been cases of people defecating on cars and in churches, on cop cars. These 2 shocking headlines just from this weekend. This one is, oh, that's nice. I love that. This one, F the police, Occupy Oakland protesters are throwing urine at the media. The only bright side is they're throwing it at the media. But did you see last week's show with Rabbi Lapin? Occupiers disrupt pro-life event by dumping condoms on Catholic schoolgirls. And that one, I guess, is okay. This story, as many of the others, have everything in common with the typical front page story. This kind of story that cable news networks chew on all day long. Now, let's be honest, if I showed you that story and replaced Occupy protester with Tea Partier. Tea Partier disrupts event by dumping condoms on Catholic schoolgirls. Tea Partier says, F the police, throw urine on the media. The media would have had an Chris Matthews would have felt another tingle go up his leg. They would have had an orgy with that story, and that's appropriate because they're all in bed with these guys. So why is this story important? This story is important because it's not an isolated incident, and it also points to history. It is a disturbing trend, and it